B4 sat down with Tony Haines, partner at Wenn Townsend and long-time supporter of B4, to discuss the current issues Oxfordshire is experiencing and what we might see in the future.
Good morning, Tony. Thanks very much for joining us at B4. One of our longest standing supporters of the magazine. I think you've been with us since day one, haven't you?
Yes, yeah.
So I appreciate your support. With B4, we're making a few changes as we get further into 2017 with a new website launching next month. And one area where B4 probably has fallen short over the years is not tackling the key issues facing lots of businesses. So we're going to be canvassing the opinion of the wider business community, the B4 network, as to how certain issues that they have to deal with day in, day out affect their business. These might be issues such as housing, the cost of living for staff in Oxfordshire. We just touched on off camera about IT and the stresses and strains of work on the workforce, the transport issues faced by all of us coming in and out of Oxford City Centre. And you, as a long-standing firm, Wenn Townsend, would have seen lots of these changes and how they've affected you over the years, and going forward the uncertainty of things like Brexit. So, having chucked all that lot at you, Tony, where would you like to start? Which of these issues would you like to tackle first?
There's so many, aren't there, really? I mean, it's almost down to you to ask a question and I'll specify an area.
Well, let's go for housing, shall we?
All right, we'll start.
How do your staff and colleagues, how have you found it a problem recruiting, given the high cost of living of accommodation, cost of living in Oxfordshire?
It's very, very difficult. You get the recruiting of trainees isn't so difficult because you'll always have a pool of people that want to do their degree in Oxford and stay in Oxford and work in Oxford, and they've fallen in love with Oxford. And we do have quite a lot of people from Oxford University or Brookes University, mainly Oxford University, that come and train here. They may stay on after they've qualified, or quite often they will seek jobs in London. And okay, we have the new rail link and the rail station at Kidlington, which is a benefit to everybody in Oxford, but it's also got a double-edged sword to it in the fact that why do people want to work in Oxford when they can hop on a train for 45 minutes or however long it is and get a salary in London, which is always going to be more.
Is it significant, that difference in salary?
Oh yeah, definitely. The problem Oxford's always had is it's got London prices in terms of property and Oxford salaries. That's a known fact. I think the multiple of salary to average housing is 17. A couple of years ago it was 11, which sounded ridiculous. I think it's up to 16 or 17 times salary now, which is clearly unaffordable. And yes, you can point the finger at the council or the building developers and tell them that they're not doing enough and they're not providing enough affordable housing for people on the one hand. But if you take a map of Oxford 60 years ago and overlay it with a map of Oxford, just Oxford, within the ring road today, you'll see there's hardly been any development because there's nowhere to build anything else. The only development that's really happened is big houses have been cut up into smaller units for people, which to a certain extent leads to the increased stress for people because they're living in smaller and smaller units rather than the nice houses that their predecessors used to have.
So where's the breaking point? What happens next?
Well, Bicester, Abingdon, Witney, they've all expanded and they're sort of dormitory towns for, not just for Oxford, but in Bicester's case for London largely, from what I can tell. The breaking point, the dam's almost begun to burst with the Bayswater development. I don't know if you've been past that lately, but it's going ahead. I don't know how many houses they're putting there, but one important thing to note is the bypass isn't being widened or made into 3 lanes. a set of traffic lights is being put in so that people can get in and out of that estate. But it's just going to add to infrastructure problems that nobody cares about or is addressing.
And with more development, commercial development in the centre of Oxford, with the Westgate coming on stream later this year, adding, there are plenty of other developments also which are attracting more commuters and more tourists students into the centre of Oxford. That's just going to compound the problems.
Of course it is. When you think the new Westgate development is going ahead, they've added no additional parking for those shoppers, from what I understand. I don't think there's a single...
Understand it's actually less car parking spaces.
Well, okay, so there's less car parking spaces. There's I'm not going to name the store because everybody knows who it is, but they're having a lovely store built there. What do you think will happen on the grand opening in terms of traffic down the Botley Road, the Abingdon Road, probably the Woodstock Road as well?
Yeah, well, yeah, it'll come to a standstill.
It'll come to a standstill, and all those people that will be going over the first or second weekends to see that new development, all the restaurants and all the rest of it, do you think they're going to come back enthusiastically if you've had to sit for a considerable time when you're certainly not used to sitting in Oxford traffic? Or do you think they'll go to Reading or High Wycombe or elsewhere?
Yeah, it's a valid point.
Because I know what I would do if I was one of those people. I'd say, well, it took forever to get there and I'm not going back.
You just have to get the bike out.
Yeah, but if you're going to have developments in Oxford, you need to put the infrastructure in place for people to be able to get to and from those places without a great deal of wasted time. And that's not happening. There's all sorts of reasons why it probably can't happen anyway, so why are you doing these big developments?
So adding to everybody's stress and strain, and we touched on that in the workplace, the stresses and strains that all staff face, compounded, you touched on IT and the immediacy of need for information and work to be done, people doing 2 or 3 jobs compared to one person's job 10, 15, 20 years ago. How do Wenn Townsend tackle problems in the workplace like this faced by their staff?
Well, we've got systems in place to help them cope. If they do find that they need additional support or help, as any other organisation should or ought to have. But I mean, and we make sure that people aren't overloaded with work. At certain times of the year, accountants are, always known for January deadlines with self-assessment, etc. But that's not going to get any better because they're talking about making quarterly tax returns for everybody, not just an annual one once a year. So, that workload will probably increase. HMRC and the government seem to think that people can do all these things on their own, online, without any help. Well, I for one would certainly say to people, I wouldn't do that if I were you. You're going to miss something out, and the onus is always on the taxpayer to get everything right all the time. And people aren't expert, form fillers or tax experts. They've got a job to do themselves. So there are certain stresses in life that you do need to outsource to people.
So does that mean more work for Wenn Townsend?
More stress for us and probably more work, but you never know. Some people are quite happy to have a go and do it themselves. Other people, see the benefits of using others to do the job. I wouldn't go and do my own plumbing because it would cost me a fortune in the long run. I'd come home to a flooded house. But when it comes to form filling, people seem, including the government and HMRC, to think that we all can do it and get it right every time. But of course they've got the power of law and the ability to raise penalties and interest every time somebody doesn't quite get it right without any help.
So it's just going to be something that we have to get used to and step up to the plate. And
definitely, which is another, I can understand why they're doing it because they want to collect tax quicker, but they're already on payments on account. I just think it's another one of those bureaucracies, the cost of which is being passed down to the person paying the tax in the first place.
Tony, I mean, you've been at Wenn Townsend for how long now?
Oh, 30 years.
And in all your time, you've been through various crises, economic downturns, etc. Have you felt that the environment, the economic landscape has been as fragile as it is now before, with the uncertainties of Brexit and the pressures with local housing, transport, bank finance, stresses on workforce? Are things all coming to a bit of a head, or is that overplaying the situation?
I wouldn't say it's overplaying the situation. I think we need to get a grip with certain things, and the unknown is always something that really affects the economy, because it affects people, and people just stop functioning. Well, they don't stop functioning, but they just stop. They become more cautious where there's uncertainty. It's always the case. You know, if you're going to move house, or we'll wait to see if the interest rates go up, because they've been so low for so long. That's really helped everybody through the sort of turmoil, and a lot of people haven't seen or experienced that turmoil. A lot of the cuts are only just beginning to really bite. So, you know, social services cuts and all the rest of it. But we've seen peaks, but we haven't seen anything last for as long as this. This has been going on 10 years now, this uncertainty, and certainly with the banks there. The banks have a reluctancy to lend or to allow people to have facilities, but are always very keen to say that they can look at things. Having looked at things, in my experience, clients aren't getting the finance that they're expecting, hoping for, or requiring from banks. They're getting another offer which doesn't quite allow them to do what they were hoping to do. So it's just got so much tighter. You know, the banks are always throwing around very unhelpful phrases like, "Oh, we've had to stress test you. You haven't passed the stress test," or "we've had to." And these are customers that have been with banks 30 or 40 years and should
sail through.
Yeah, they should sail through. There should be no problems whatsoever with banks using their judgment, but bankers aren't allowed to use their judgment. It's pretty obvious from what I've seen that they have to go beyond that, and there's a lot of boxes to tick, and if you don't tick all of them,
computer says no.
Yeah.
So where do you see us in 5-10 years' time with the acceleration in crowdfunding and other means of finance, banks coming onto the high street, offering, in the case of Metro, for example, to quote one bank, decisions within 24 hours, and promising much more access to funds? Don't quote me on that, but that's
well, I would imagine, but you know, I haven't got a crystal ball. I would think some of the newer banks from the continent that have come in will be coming. There's branches in Oxford of certain banks that do help, do understand a customer, and will do what they can to deliver what that customer needs. The real problem is the big retail high street banks have got these boxes to tick, and you don't get to see a bank manager per se. Everything gets passed up, underwriters get involved, and a lot of it gets refused, to be quite honest with you, at the moment.
So how are Wenn Townsend and Wenn Townsend clients faring in this era of uncertainty?
Well, it hasn't started yet, has it? It's not.
Well, we've been uncertain for quite some time with.
Well, that's how they've done it. That's how I've done it. That's how everybody seems to be doing it. It's the British way, isn't it? I don't like the phrase because it appears on tea towels and coffee mugs, but keep calm and carry on. You've got to carry on. You've got to make your decisions based purely on what you know at the time of making them, and hope that things don't radically change, which you know, the budget happened a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that changed was the Tory party were not going to increase income tax during their term. But, of course, NI got increased. And then the backbenchers said, well, that's increasing income tax. Well, income tax and NI are two different things. But to the layman, it's tax being increased, isn't it? Out of your pay packet. So having increased it, he was forced to backpedal and say, no, it's not going to happen now. And my point, I suppose, is you can't have a government that is that short-sighted leading us. You know, we're talking about the Chancellor here, leading us into negotiations for an exit of Europe. It needs to be a little bit more robust and a lot less wishy-washy, which again plays on the uncertainty of, oh my God, where are we going to go? We've now got people negotiating our exit, and they've probably not got the skill. They ought to introduce the people from Canada. That's why we've got a Canadian governor of the Bank of England. And they are used to doing those sorts of things, and they have even offered help, and they should be involved. Whether that will happen or not will be, you know, about people's egos at the top.
I'm sure.
It's all very political, isn't it?
But how are your clients faring generally? I mean, you've got a wide spectrum of clients in different
They're not
sectors.
doing badly. There's, you know, we've got a lot of international clients that are operating here. There's one or two quite large ones that I'm concerned with, because I don't know whether they will, after we extract ourselves from Europe, be in a sensible financial position to continue trading here or not. I don't know, they don't know, nobody knows. So what do? Just give them the service that they need for now, and we have to cross bridges when we come to them. We don't know what those bridges are. And it's not me being negative. You don't, I don't.
So keep calm and carry on then, Tony.
I know it's a boring message, but yeah. And make sure that you take advice from whoever you need to. And it's not, you know, it's not a pointless exercise, because my view is only one.
Tony, well, I appreciate your time today, and we look forward to catching up again later on in the year and seeing where a possible exit has taken us.